One. Hello, Milena. Fantastic to have you on the show today. Very excited about our conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Real pleasure. We connected through an old podcast, colleague, friend, person I interviewed who's also big on this whole unhustling and taking time to rest. It was previous episode with Max Frenzel. I'll put in the show notes. And I'd love to hear how it all began with you. How did you get into unhustling?
Wow, do you want the long story or the short version?
Short story, then we could give how to do it and why it's so great afterwards. So short and brief version, like how did you get there?
Long story longer, like a friend of mine says. I came to the US to pursue a career in marketing. I told you I'm originally from Bulgaria. And I haven't gotten a lot of sleep tonight, so my accent is a little bit stronger, actually. I can feel it. But in any case, I came to chase the American dream. And I went full on. I completed a master's degree in international marketing in San Diego. I started working for a media company with the early ages of online marketing. I worked with some phenomenal clients for about 5 years. And then I transitioned into being a marketing director for a ski resort, which was a big check off on my bucket list. I did that for 10 years, got paid to ski and market, something that I love and have loved from since I was a kid. And that was super fun. Eventually, bureaucracy and paperwork and emails and meetings started to get to me. So I decided I'm just gonna, and social media was really taking off. And I have this entrepreneurial spirit in me. So I decided I'm gonna start my own company. So I went full on and started my own venture. I called it Out and About Marketing. And it was going great. I built a phenomenal team, an 8-figure business. I worked with some amazing clients. I actually was pretty focused on health and wellness. So I had clients in the gym industry, health and wellness, travel and recreation, fun stuff. I worked with some celebrities like Madonna and Steve Nash and Dr. Weil. And everything was going great, except that I was hustling. I was hustling a lot. I was working, 12, 14, 16-hour days, sleeping with my phone. I would come home from the office, cook dinner with my husband, and then get back to work and work till 1, 2 a.m. My sleep started to suffer. My health started to deteriorate. I had 1 year I was spending a lot of time in some doctor's office for some bizarre reason that normally 80-year-olds get. And I was in my 30s, so I started to realize that my mental health is suffering, my health suffering, my relationships were suffering, my marriage was, not really existent. And I noticed that my attention was getting really fragmented from all this time on social media channels. So long story longer, I told you it's going to be a long story. We planned a 10-day trip to Baja California Sur, which turned out to be a digital detox trip by default, not by design. There was just no internet in the town we were in. And it was in that time when we decided to learn to kiteboard. Now, kiteboarding is a really, really dangerous activity, and you really have to focus, or you could possibly die. It was in that moment, it was one of the first very mindful moments that I've experienced in a really long time, that I started to think, A, there's more to life than working, and B, is there a way we could do this better instead of hustling on a treadmill 24/7? Is there a way we can redesign the way we work? And so that took me down on a long path of self-discovery, self-awareness, mindfulness training, and human potential training, coaching training. And eventually, in all of these trainings, I realized that the way we are working is broken. And it's not just in the US, it's worldwide. Europe is quite a bit better, actually, but there's still some countries that are doing it wrong. So the way we're living is broken. The way we're playing is broken, really. And so Unhustle was born as a desire to create this movement to shift our perspective, and by slowing down, we can actually speed up. But it's so counterintuitive for us to understand.
That's amazing. And it's funny how it's something that's difficult somehow, that we all have this tendency, especially when we're passionate, especially business owners and entrepreneurs, to want to hustle. Like you were explaining, when you had your own marketing business and you grew it to 8 figures, it's sort of it's almost an addiction, that work, that dopamine, that kick we get from it. And then we're in this vicious cycle. And then this is something that I've found that's really interesting, that when our energy is depleted, we get even more hooked. It's like this is the only thing giving us energy, and we no longer have the willpower or desire or discipline to switch off and take time off. So reversing is a whole other game. So I'd love to hear, and I'm sure this is what the audience would love to know, how do you then go from being such a strong hustler to becoming an unhustler?
Well, I do believe that the right amount of hustle or the right amount of hard work is important and noble and meaningful. But I don't believe that if all you do is work, the research now and the data and all the studies show that it starts to impact negatively your productivity and your performance and your creativity, which is actually what happened to me. Now, my clients were hiring me for my creativity, but my creativity was getting depleted. I don't know if I had a burnout the way burnout is currently defined by the World Health Organization, but it suffered my creativity. Now, here's an interesting piece of research that I find fascinating and has really been able to, when I explain this to people, it's a very easy way to understand why we're so addicted to work. In the work of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, very difficult name to say. Thankfully, I'm Bulgarian. I can somewhat wrestle with it. He's a Hungarian-American psychologist, let me get this right, who coined the flow concept. Now, in his research, he discovered that even though people say they would rather not be working and have more time for leisure, most people who use their minds for work, I refer to them as mind workers, spend 64% of the time in flow at work. And flow is defined as really being in the zone, as an activity where you're focused, it energizes you, it motivates you, it fulfills you, right? All these things, like you were saying, dopamine is one of the neurochemicals of flow. There's more, right? Serotonin and all these cocktail of neurons going on through your body. When you get into a state of flow, this is where high performance are at their optimal performance, creators, musicians. So if we're at work at on average 64% of the time, then when we go to leisure or time off, our leisure time, for the most part, is passive leisure. We're scrolling on social media, watching TV, hanging out with friends, but we don't have a challenge to skill ratio. This is where skiing, an activity like skiing or kiteboarding, that can actually put you in flow. So most people, when they're in leisure, it's only about 20% of the time that they're in flow. So even though most people say that rather not be working, they feel better when they're working. And I think we saw this with the pandemic as well. We ended up working 3 extra hours on average, partly because we didn't want to deal with the news and we didn't want to deal with the house errands and the kids playing. And so we ended up spending more time working. It feels safe. It makes us feel good, which is crazy, but it's just how we are hardwired. So when you understand this concept, you can spend more time in deep play and active recovery. It's much easier to get the same amount of dopamine and feel-good chemicals that run through your body as the ones you get from completing a challenging project or doing something that feels good. But if you do too much of it, you end up burnout. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And I've got his book Flow behind me, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. I always struggle with his name too.
Yeah.
I feel I'm always checking on the internet because I'm always quoting him. Wait, SCZS. Okay.
Hard name.
But yes, and what you
it's
said.
in that book.
Yes, yes. And I remember reading that and also being totally struck by how strange it was. So essentially what you're saying is the reason we work so hard is because we haven't learned to rest or play in a way that's as fulfilling to us. We get more of
Right.
the dopamine kick, we get more of the flow feeling when we're working because the tasks are more challenging and rewarding. And if our playtime or recovery time is passive, if we're not doing something like skiing or climbing or maybe reading, but active reading, not passively, then we are less likely to be in flow and get dopamine. So I feel that already you're sharing one of the secrets of unhustling around rediscovering how we can play. But in practice, how can people learn to really develop the superpowers of unhustling?
Well, the entire framework that I came up with has 7 steps they all start with and so unlearning is the first phase. This is where we have to look at the research, because just me sharing with people what my opinion is doesn't count for validity. And so looking at the research is that shows that working over 55 hours a week is, decreases your productivity. Looking at the research of something like the 4-day work week, right, which shows that people can work less and be more creative, have more time for well-being. So unlearning is shifting your mindset, your perspective. This indoctrination that we have in the cult of productivity, right? This trance of being on the hedonic treadmill, and it starts with that, right? It starts with your mindset. The second step is unplugging from technology, which is a big one. And this is where mindfulness comes in. And I know, especially Gen Z and millennials, they're digital natives. They grew up with phones in their hands. Their digital lives come before their analog lives. So taking some time away to just sit with your thoughts without listening to a podcast or an audiobook or something, going in nature, and all these things we know we need to do. Just taking some time to unplug on a daily basis. Maybe you can't go on a 10-day digital detox, trip. Very few people can afford that, but you can possibly spend half a day without your phone, without constantly looking for your phone. I think we touch our phone something like 2,347 times a day, subconsciously or consciously. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And I have a lot of stats in my upcoming book about the crazy amount of time we spend online, and on social media, and it fragments our attention, and then all the distractions while we're working is also part of this. So something simple is removing all the notifications from your phone, or I did something great with I don't have my phone with me, but I did something. I was going to show you. I did something where you can change the raise awake on your phone, so when you pick up your phone, it doesn't light up. And just doing this little change, you can. It doesn't grab your attention right away. Research now shows that even if you have your phone face down on your desk with no notifications on it, just the actual proximity to your phone decreases your working memory and your focus. So you're better off leaving your phone in another room, like I did, and I can't show you now what a raise awake is. Okay, back to the steps, the framework, the Unhustle framework. The third step is unthinking. This is where we do practices to get you out of your head and into your body, so you can tap into your inner wisdom. Again, comes down to a lot of mindfulness practices, so that you can actually know what emotions are running to you, know what limiting beliefs you're dealing with, and you can tap into a lot bigger intelligence of your body, your intuition, curiosity, wonder, all these things that we are forgetting how to do. So how do you do this? Again, the most go-to are like exercise, yoga, qigong, walking barefoot, all these practices that you can do to connect with who you are, and listen to what's going on inside. And that's where a lot of mindfulness practices come in. The next step is uncomplicating. This is where you can really simplifying your life and your business. I think we're just overwhelmed because we think we have to do all these things. Or we think like, I'm currently simplifying, redesigning my life again, and I'm looking at all the stuff we've accumulated in our house, and I'm going, why? A, why, and B, the more I'm like cleaning up my office, the more I'm realizing that my mind's getting clearer. I can actually focus on a project. So decluttering, in a way, there's a lot of people talking about minimalism. I think minimalism is great. I'm not necessarily saying everybody should be a minimalist. But I did live in an Airstream for 4 months out of the year, and I realized that you can live in a tiny home and be very happy with very few things, which actually opens up space for the energy and time for the things you want to do. Another step really important is unwinding, and this is where well-being becomes a priority, right? This is where things like I have like an unhustle morning practices, taking care of your mind and body, and just really tuning into what you need without listening to any fads and any practices, and just do what feels right for you. And I have a set of practices called the sunrise method, which is why I was getting distracted by the sunrise, where you go outside and get some sunlight on your face. It improves your sleep. You start your morning without your phone, so you don't go into a reactive mode. N stands for nature, connecting with nature. R stands for reading and writing, things like journaling, morning pages, reading something inspirational in the morning instead of negative news. I is for setting your intentions for the day. S is for stillness, mindfulness, meditation, just sitting still, even if it's just drinking your coffee for a minute. And E is for energy. This is your cold shower, bulletproof coffee, a little bit of movement. So mix and match however you like. Obviously, there's a lot of people talking about morning routines. I'm not talking about a morning routine. I'm all about sleeping, feel good, you'll perform better. And finally, we have unbeating, which is where you really decide what you want to prioritize, what it absolutely needs to get done, and removing everything else. I just posted something on LinkedIn, this little visual about how, we have this big box of what we want to do and a much smaller box of what's realistic to do, and a tiny little box of what really matters. And it really resonated with people when they saw that visual. And it really comes down to, what do you want to say no to? What are the big projects that really make an impact in your business? And ultimately, and I think one of the biggest things you and I want to talk today about is unleashing your human potential, which is really how do you create peak experiences with more flow at work, in life, and in play, right? How do you design your life, work, and play so that you spend more time in flow, which pushes you in a state of high performance? But I feel like without the previous steps, that high performance is not reachable. It's not realistic. So this is kind of the Unhustle framework.
Amazing. Thank you for saying all of this and summarizing them in the 7 steps. I want to sort of recap them. Let's see if I got all of them. So first of all, unlearning, get rid of all the preconceived ideas that we have. Then unplugging, which I love, definitely connect with nature and spend time away from technology. Then unthinking, which I really like, because that's something I only realized, I don't know, a few years ago, about the power of being in your body and not in your mind. So that was amazing. Then was it uncomplicated or unwinding? Uncomplicated, no? Step 4. Also super important, so easy to complicate things and not realize how we can simplify them. Then it was unwinding, no?
Yeah.
I'm relaxing.
Without making time and space, you don't have time to take care of yourself.
And then there was one more, and then unleashing. Unbusying, that's right. That's the one a lot of people need. And then unleashing, yes.
And then unleashing your human potential. A lot of entrepreneurs, we get told to hustle, right? So I had to figure out, how do you build a business without hustling? And flow is obviously one way to do it. But another way to doing it is by differentiating yourself. Now, if you don't make time and space to think how to be different, you're going to continue to hustle and compare yourself with everybody else. So I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, startup founders, mentoring for tech stars, and I see this all the time. People miss clarity, self-confidence, self-awareness. Most entrepreneurs, 99% of entrepreneurs I speak with, it's the same challenges. All of these challenges are not overcome by hustling.
Yeah, I think the part on clarity, definitely. I see that time and time again. I see it time and time again in myself. And I think if I don't take time to, have a walk at lunchtime or finish earlier one evening or just block an hour out in my calendar to reflect, there's no way I would have that clarity. I just think we can't move forward unless we're clear on our intentions, our goals, our processes, our ideal client, our products, how we're different. And to think, we need space. You can't think if you've got 20 Zoom calls one after the next, then you're just in reactive mode. So I feel it's so important to have the clarity. And yes, definitely also the self-confidence, the self-trust, which comes up time and time and time and time again, which is linked but different to self-confidence. So I agree with you. Those are definitely very common entrepreneurial challenges that we can't solve by hustling.
And not just entrepreneurial leaders, right? They need time to think. They need time and space to think, because without that clarity, the team is overwhelmed and burnout. And without the clarity, performance drops, burnout increases. So super important. I think it was Warren Buffett who said, busy is the new stupid, right?
I never heard that quote.
And he has something like 3 things on his calendar for the month, 3 meetings for the month. He says the most important thing is to take time to think. Without time to think, you can't go into action. We're just on this, rat race, go, 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 without taking the time to be strategic about what we're doing and to be, creative with what we're doing, so we can shine our own superpowers and stop comparing ourselves to millions of other people, right? You're one in 7.765 billion people, one person, right? And we want people to shine with their gifts and abilities and be at optimal high-performing state, not be burnout, depleted, and sleep deprived.
Absolutely. So in our last part of the podcast, how do we unleash our potential? How do we create these high performance cycles so we can thrive, grow our business, be successful, all of that by, working hard strategically, but not in an over hustling way?
Yeah, I mean, I do believe it starts with experimenting. And even if you do it for just a week or just even a day, to see if you can shrink your work day, increase your focus, and optimize your leisure time and playtime. Even if you take 5 minutes a day in the morning to just breathe and say, what am I, the one most important thing for today that I want to accomplish, and then do that for the first 90 minutes of the day. Most of us shy away from the projects that really make an impact on our work, and so we get distracted with business and emails and meetings. So I think the step to high performance and unleashing your human potential starts with self-awareness, self-mastery, and unhustling.
Yeah, taking time to slow down and breathe and reflect strategically. It's interesting what you were saying right now, that we shy away from the work that really moves the needle forward in our business. Do you feel this is linked to fear of failure? Do you feel this is linked to just being reactive because we get a dopamine kick? Why do you think there's such a tendency to actually avoid the most meaningful work?
Yeah, fear is the biggest one. Whether it's fear of failure, some version of imposter syndrome, of lack of confidence, all these things. And that's why I'm saying take as much time in the morning. That's why the Unhustle morning practices. Take as much time in the morning to clear your mind, to increase your self-confidence, to think positively, to develop that growth mindset, because your rest of the day is going to depend on how you show up every day, right? So that fear, though, can be turned really quickly into excitement. And so how do you find, it's because they show up the exact same way in your body. So how do you find the courage to turn fear into excitement, so you can show up and do the work that actually matters and not seek the short-term dopamine hits that we get from emails and meetings and the other projects that we love to do and check off the little to-do list, but in reality, they're not that important. So it's finding courage to focus on what matters.
Yes, I think courage is definitely a huge part, but also focus that I'm really passionate about, that's directly linked to Unhustle. It's they go sort of hand in hand for sure. Because what you were saying earlier on in the interview was how when you had your marketing business, you'd lost that sort of attention, that you weren't as mindful and present. And so I feel definitely fear is one obstacle, but also people are shrinking their attentional span. So they just don't have that focus. First thing in the morning, it's almost like a noise in their head, even before they've checked their emails, and be able to clear away from that, hence the mindfulness practice, to be able to say, all this can wait. An hour, 2 hour while I do this most important work and task. I think that's also a habit of focus, a habit of changing the way we work, hence the unlearning phase. No.
Yeah. Yeah, and a really great practice that everybody can implement is just the 10-minute rule. Mel Robbins calls it the 5-second rule. I call it the 10-minute rule. It's basically say, I'm just going to do it for 10 minutes, whatever it is. Exercise, yoga, meditation, or work. Just do it for 10 minutes. Because if you can do it for 10 minutes, you'll most likely continue to do it. And I try to shift my mindset about this and ask, what if it was easy and fun? Could I make it, effortless? Can I make it easy and fun? Or do I look at it as, oh, I don't really want to do that? Can you shift your energy around? And I guess a big portion of how you do this is with what's the bigger purpose behind it. So let's say with Unhustle, let's say I'm working on a book, and writing a book, I'm discovering is extremely difficult. I did not think it was going to be that difficult at all. So, so for me to shift my mindset around, I have to look at it as I'm writing a book to be able to share my knowledge and my experience and my lessons learned with other people. And so I'm trying to shift my mindset and said, if this book helps one more person, then it's worth it, right? And not just focus on I'm writing a book, but focus on how you serve and help other people, which is why finding my deeper purpose within Hustle has been key to allowing me to work in a state of flow and with ease and joy and fun, as opposed to with the marketing agency. And I still love marketing, but I was doing it more from a perspective of monetary rewards and growing a business, as opposed to being of service to humanity. It's a completely different way of looking at things.
It's interesting you mentioned this, because when I was preparing for the interview, I checked your website and I really thought I can feel the purpose coming through it. I can't explain, but you could just sense that it was really purpose driven. Of course, there are other businesses like this, but you felt a real purpose behind the whole movement of Unhustle, the community you've created, your story behind it. And I think it shows. I think it shows when someone is really, or when a business is really purpose driven, that they're really doing this to contribute and they believe it's going to change the way we approach work and live. And that drives you in a certain way. And it's just not the same to businesses that aren't like that. And not all businesses are really purpose driven. Some businesses are just businesses, they like what they do, they help their clients, they earn profit. Nothing wrong with that. It's just there's a different touch, there's a different feeling, there's a different energy that comes out when there's a strong purpose. And it also helps not only, clients and people to be attracted to it, but like you said, the person running the business, it helps you in those moments of when you need to shift your energy or when you're getting discouraged, to reconnect with that purpose.
Thank you so much for saying that. It really means a lot to me. What's interesting about purpose-driven businesses too is, especially in right now, it's very relevant. Purpose-driven businesses are actually more profitable, like 15 times more profitable than the S&P 500. So this is from a book. I forget the name of the authors, but yeah, they did research. And so if we take a look at a company like Zoom, which had huge potential during the pandemic to make a lot of money, they stayed true to their purpose and gave away their software to a lot of schools, still made a lot of money. Very, very purpose-driven company. They had their employees come together in once a week, chat with all the leaders where everybody was equal and just share stories of how they're helping people, and they just inspired everybody. And the employees worked really hard, obviously, so we can all communicate during and now. So still, people want to work for a company with purpose. People want to work for a company that have shared values with them. And a lot of companies are struggling to find talent. I don't know how things are in London, but in the US, we have the Great Resignation. So as a business owner, having a strong purpose can benefit not just the bottom line, but also hiring top people to work for you.
Absolutely. I think it's so interesting. I don't know how we moved from unhustling to purpose, but they're all connected, because when you're purpose driven, you don't need to work as many hours at least, but the hours that you put in will be more effective because you're driven by your purpose. We're already approaching the last few minutes of the podcast interview. I feel you've covered so much. You've given us your whole framework of unhustling, which was fantastic. What's the last note you'd like to leave the audience with before the end of the interview?
Yeah, I have a free ebook that they can download, which includes the Unhustle framework with some stories from people and companies as to how they're implementing it to design life, work, and play effortlessly. So they can download that at unhustle.com/ebook. And connect with me on social media and let me know the biggest takeaway from this podcast. I'd love to hear it. And you can find me at Unhustle, as well as on the website, unhustle.com.
Amazing. I've put them all in the show notes anyway, but you can find it on Hustle, on social media, the website, the community, the podcast even. So yes, lots of ways to get in touch with you. Thank you so much, Milena. I've really loved our conversation. I think it's such an important message to get out there into the world. So thank you so much for being a guest today.
Thank you for having me.